Thank you everyone for joining us today and welcome to our Digital Lab seminar on digital case management for unions. I'm John Wood from the TUC's Digital Lab project, and this particular topic is one where I'm really very interested to hear what's happening out there so far, what people have been learning about it, because I've been spending a lot of time of late ringing round digital leads in our affiliates, getting a sense of where unions are as things slowly move into our new normal and what unions' big issues are going to be for digital that we could help support or unions could work on together. And case management's been cropping up quite often as a priority. And some people it's about providing more responsive service to members when they've got most awkward problems. For some of them, it's about streamlining processes and using resources more effectively. More people are looking at how they can expand the union's digital infrastructure to empower their reps, or others are finding sort of better ways to safeguard their members' sensitive personal data. And another trend that's running alongside this seems to be for unions who are getting further along in modernizing their IT infrastructure, which for most at the moment is meaning a move to the cloud for infrastructure and software services. And the two union case studies that we're grateful for presenting today fit that picture of making the most of some of the new possibilities. PCS have been running a large project over the last couple of years to move from a legacy membership database onto Salesforce CRM. And with all the basics now under their belt, they're looking at next steps to realize the potential of the tool set. And case management is one of their current priorities to look at next. And we've got Paul Barnsley and Paul Hawkins to tell us some more about that. And from Accord, we've got Chris Ramel. Accord have been through a kind of similar review of infrastructure, which has seen kind of greater use of the cloud, particularly with some really nice approaches to the deeper possibilities they've got in using Microsoft Office 365. And then finally, we've got the TUC's Data Protection Officer, Andrea Peace, who's been looking at the kinds of considerations that unions are going to need to ensure that any new approaches keep both the union and the member safe. And to kick us off, please, welcome our panel. I'd like to ask Paul and Paul to start telling us a bit about what they're up to at PCS.
My name is Paul Barnsley. I am the head of legal in PCS, and our department is part of a wider structure within the union called Digital Legal and Membership Services, which is looking at how we provide scalable solutions to a number of challenges that unions face. And as John said a moment ago, the decision we've made is that we will use Salesforce as the platform on which we're going to deliver our digital solutions. And there are a number of projects that we are currently working on, which we'd like to talk to you about. And what we're thinking about as a union is a number of challenges that face us. The first challenge is members and activists want more from their union at a time where budgets are tight, where staffing numbers are finite, and where we're all working in a very different way. So at the moment, our offices are closed. We believe that blended working is likely to be the future for most of our members in the civil service. But also all of the evidence is there is a demographic shift in the way that people want to receive and to communicate with organisations, and in their own lives, people increasingly use digital products to get the information that they need and to interact with institutions and organisations. So what we are working on at the moment is that we're looking at 4 discrete areas of work. The first of those is casework, and my colleague Paul Hawkins will talk you through in a moment what we're doing in terms of casework and a system called Cases that the union will be launching later this year. The second area of work that we're looking at is the development of PCS Knowledge. Is effectively a digital tool where we will be able to produce content and seek to resolve common queries that members and activists raise with the union. The third area of work that we are currently looking at is a project called Omnichannel. Omnichannel is a process by which whatever mechanism or method members or activists choose to use to communicate with the union, whether that's Twitter, Facebook, Messenger, email, it all gets routed into one central casework system for ease of us tracking that query, ease of linking it up to our membership system, and to ensure that we have a professional, coherent and timely response to those queries. Aligned to Omnichannel is a new telephony system called Natterbox, which we launched earlier this month. Natterbox is fully integrated into Salesforce, it's fully integrated into our Omnichannel system, and it offers for members and activists who want to contact the union. Like many unions, we've moved almost entirely to email communication since the pandemic. Natterbox is us coming back out into the wider world and offering a range of solutions to our members so they can communicate effectively with the union. And then finally, we are looking at the launch of a smartphone app later in 2021, which will be downloadable onto smartphones and will give members and activists full connectivity with the union, dependent on what level of access they have. That depends on what positions that they hold in the union. So they're the projects that we're working on, and Paul will talk you through in a moment case management and also knowledge, so people can have a quick look at what we're doing and actually see it in action, so they get a better flavour of that. There are 4 specific tasks that we are seeking to use digital solutions to improve. The first is member and activist queries. Our view is that membership and activist queries will increase exponentially over the next period for a number of reasons. Number 1, it's how people prefer to communicate. Number 2, as the union organises in new areas, we don't have established rep structures where that will be the first port of call for the member. But also fundamentally as a union, we have to think about how do we manage workflow, how do we manage caseload, and we think digital solutions are an integral part of that. So all of these projects that we're talking to you about, whether that's cases, whether that's Omnichannel, whether it's Natterbox, whether it's the app, all of this is aimed to ensure that we are able to professionally and coherently manage that predicted increase in the number of queries that the union will address. The second, we'll need to address the second area that we are looking at is subs support. So we want to make it easier for our members to pay their subscriptions. We want to make it easier for our members to contact the union if they need to change their subscription level. And thirdly, we want to make it easier for our own staff to manage direct debit payments. So that is the second area of work that these projects are going to fully integrate with. Third area of work is legal casework, and we'll come on to that in a moment. And then the final area is membership profile. So the aim of our projects is that a member can seamlessly raise a query with the union through any method of communication they choose. The member has greater ownership over their subscription and their membership to the union. The member's profile can be edited and changed seamlessly. And finally, the member can raise a case with the union. All of that can be done within Salesforce. All of that is joined together. We will have a 360-degree view of what that member has done, and we will be able to look at that at a glance. So by way of conclusion, the first is we believe that self-service is a critical question for unions going forward. In PCS, there has been a culture over a number of years that representatives of the union and the full-time officers and staff of the union will answer every question. We think that given the digital tools now available, we can help members to answer some of their own questions, freeing up staff to deal with more complex cases. And we think moving to the solutions I've briefly been able to talk to you about today will facilitate more and more self-serve, more and more opportunities for members to answer their own questions without needing to speak to a member of the union. Secondly, we believe that managing workflow is a critical task for unions. We are all, I think, working in an environment where the demands on our time are huge, where the demands are very difficult to predict, and where there's a real ebb and flow. And we think digital solutions can help to smooth out and to manage that workflow. I think the third benefit that we see is that we can offer our members professional service when they need to contact a union, and reputationally, we believe if members have a good experience of interaction with their union, they will tell their mates, they will tell colleagues at work who perhaps are not members of a union. Fourthly, we believe that we want to invest in upskilling our own people, and we want to free people up from dealing with mundane tasks, enable those people to deal with more complex challenges, more critical organising challenges about complex legal cases, or work around bargaining and organising priorities. The only way we can free up that resource is if we reduce the number of standard queries that they're having to deal with at the moment about subs, about membership profile, or basic queries which come into the office. And finally, digital tools enable us to move to a more flexible system of working where our staff can work from home, our staff can work in locations other than PCS offices, and we think that is of value to their work-life balance. I'll leave it there, John, for now, and I'll hand over to my colleague, Paul Hawkins. Paul is a member of the digital team in PCS. The digital solutions that I've been talking about today, we are developing in-house, and Paul is one of our designers and one of the key people working on the development of these projects. So I'll hand over to Paul, who can talk to you in a bit more detail. I think Paul's got a short slideshow as well that we want to share with you.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. As Paul said, I'm Paul Hawkins, and I'm one of the three developers and designers on our digital team. We're working, as Paul said, with the Salesforce platform to build these solutions. And what I'm going to show you today is where we've got to when it comes to legal case management over everything else. So what you can hopefully see on the screen at the moment is the screen that is visible by a member of staff, or will be visible by a member of staff, on a new case that's come in, on a legal case here. So I'll talk you through it. So this is just an overview of how it will look, and then I've broken it down into some smaller sections and we'll go over it that way. The legal case management system that we're building is built on what is known within Salesforce simply as cases. And it is an out-of-the-box application, a functionality that, in general, if you're just a regular sort of organization using Salesforce or company using Salesforce, you use it to answer your sales queries or answer your service queries and that sort of thing. So we have adapted that already, and we use it to deal with our member queries when they come in via email. We've also, I'm sure Nick McCarthy, who will have visited this forum before, will have talked about our central response team, and here, this is the system that they use for queries that come into them. And we, as the digital team, also use this to deal with technical support and for any of the issues that come up on logging into PCS Digital, our member platform, member portal, and that sort of thing. And we are also greeted with very similar pages. So this is very much, as I say, out of the box and what you will normally see. So taking you through it bit by bit, this top panel here is essentially a member information reference. And what will come through and what is pulled through when a case is created and a member is attached to the case will be their data. So as you can see here, we've got the record type. So whether it's a legal case, whether it will be in the current builds, technical cases, or membership queries, subscription queries, that sort of thing that's displayed there. A quick access for the member email, 2 phone numbers, that's just their generic phone number that they've said is their main contact line. That could be a mobile, that could be a home, that could be work. But we've also got a secondary number there that is mobile, specifically the mobile number. And then their branch, it appears here as well. And we'll also have employer on this top panel as well, their current employer. The reason you don't see that at the moment is because this is building the test site, and the only data in the test site is the one you see here, which is Paul Test. So there's only one member in there, and that's me, or 2 members actually, but they're both me. Anyway, and you have that, and then you have the case number reference at the top left there, which is automatically generated by Salesforce, and that's their standard numbering system. You can obviously create fields, create their own case number, but then you sort of have created 2 case numbers for a single case, and things start to get a bit complicated. So when we transfer over to using Salesforce as the legal case management process, the case numbers will go into a sort of the Salesforce standard, as you can see in the top corner there. Then you have the panel on the left-hand side, which is related, and then knowledge, which Paul touched upon earlier, and I'll go into as well. So the related panel here is Salesforce cases connects with lots of other objects within Salesforce. So it connects with the member object, the branch object, and all of these objects here as well. So we have an object for any related cases. We have an object for emails that come into the system, and they're stored in that object as records. Similar with notes, any case comments. The case history is a record of the changes that you make to the fields on the case, which I can show you, which again, I'll show you in a moment on another slide. So you can quickly see here that there's a panel which you can quickly reference if you're looking for something as a caseworker. So I need an email that was sent 6 months ago, but I don't want to scroll down for a big bunch of emails. I can just go to the email related list and find it there. And that again is standard across all of our case records, like I say, member queries, technical support, etc. Then on the right-hand side of this slide, you've got knowledge. Now, Salesforce knowledge, as Paul alluded to, is essentially just a lot of records that is content to help find solutions to questions. And what we've got in there at the moment tends to be geared towards logging into PCS Digital, as you can see there. So any queries with the experience that we've got running at the moment, generic questions around health and safety. We've had a conversation with the Labour Research Department where we've taken their Law at Work book and converted it into an online resource. And in our live version, Law at Work book is available to our reps and activists as a digital format. And the thing is that with knowledge, it's not just limited, it's not limited really in the amount of articles. You can have thousands and thousands of articles. It's just how you curate it and how you manage it that becomes the big problem. And that's one of the challenges we have going forward, is working out how best to manage that. The view you're seeing here for knowledge is what staff see, but you can also present this, as I said, to reps, activists and members as well in Salesforce. And that's all done through our PCS Digital portal. And we essentially take articles and we tag them into certain topics. And then the member in the portal can search for a topic, search for a question, just type in a question into the search bar, and hopefully it will find them the answer they're looking for based around the articles that we have in there. So it's a never-ending process. But within the legal case management system itself, what will happen is there's a subject, there's essentially a subject and a short description that you can put into the case. And when that's in the form of an email, you can just paste the email into there. And what that means is that knowledge will search the text of that email or that description, pick out keywords, and if they can find an article that they think Salesforce finds an article that they thinks that is useful, they'll pull it in and they'll show you it at the top here as your key things. So for example, in here, this is a screenshot I took from a question about logging into digital, and that's the first one I got. So it's very intuitive in terms of that. And it does, like I say, just compare the text in the article to the text in the description / email that's come through. So it's very powerful, both for staff and for our members as well. This is the central panel. And this is where most of the work will occur when you're managing the cases. So as you can see here, you've got who the case owner is. So this will, in this case, it will be whoever the caseworker is, and then the member name. So whoever the member is that the case is related to initially. Then you've got here a couple of extra bits and pieces. So the status, we're going to have about 6 or 7 statuses to help the workers manage where they're at in the case. And that will trigger certain automation in the back end. So if, for example, the status is changed to awaiting further feedback or awaiting further information, then once an email comes back in from the member, that status is then updated and a notification sent to the caseworker, either via email or via Salesforce itself within the org. They'll be able to see that something has come in on that case. So they're not having to constantly check their emails to see if something's come in. It will automatically update them and tell them there's something new for them to review. And the status would change to needs review. You've also got whether it's a representation case, that's just whether we are representing them or if we're just providing advice. It's that sort of thing. Significant date, ACAS deadlines, days till the ACAS deadline. I'll show you in a moment that those 4 fields in the middle there, the significant date, days to ET, days to ACAS, and the ACAS deadline, are shown elsewhere. So we're in a bit of a to and fro about whether we want them there or whether we want them on the side. So it's a bit of a decision-making element there. And then finally, in that middle panel, you've got the unfair dismissal. So the case types, so you've got unfair dismissal, breach of contracts, all of that sort of stuff. And then if it's a discrimination case, then you can choose what kind of discrimination it is from the different options that you've got legally. And so that is all kind of customization that we've brought in and created those fields to allow the caseworkers to do what they need to do. And then at the bottom here, under the additional information section, and these are all the sections that are out of the box, but we still finding them useful. So the case origin, the priority of the case, the subject, the description, which is what I spoke about earlier, about whether it will search for knowledge. And it also allows a quick overview of what the case is about. And then the date, time it's opened, when it's closed, and all that kind of stuff. So that's all there as well. So you'll see that we've got 3 tabs here at the top. So moving into the conversation, this is a relatively new application that we've brought in. Essentially what it does is that it takes away the idea of writing an individual email each time and having this massive long email chain. And instead it converts it into comments. So instead of, so if you want to communicate with the member, you would click on public comment, type your message to them and send it off like you would do a normal email. And then it would appear in this long sort of timeline panel in the middle. And then when they respond, instead of getting an email into your email box, it would come into here and appear here at the top. You get your notification that there's something new in there and you can go and read it. As you can see here as well, you've also got the fact that the status changed from new to pending review on a certain date and who made that change. All the field history of the changes to the case appear here as well, and that's tracked and it allows for a very quick glance. Additionally, you can do private comments if you just want to make a comment on the case, but you don't want to send it to the member. So it's like a note taking, or if you want to send a private comment to another caseworker to ask for some advice on something, perhaps something like that. And the open list is essentially just it opens it up into a new panel, a separate panel, pop out, and you can just scan through it all there. So we're using that on the technical support team at the moment, and we think it's a really good product. So we're going to try and bring it in for the legal case guys as well. And finally, here you've got the case file. If you look at the files panel at the bottom here, that is the out-of-the-box functionality that Salesforce provides. And we've brought that in here. So any files that come with an email into our legal inbox, or any files that come into our form that people will be able to fill in, which again, I'll show you in a moment, goes in this files panel here at the bottom. And then the case file, so the top part here, is something new we're just experimenting with and developing to allow the caseworkers to reorder documentation to create that case file that may go to Thompson's or Slater and Gordon or whoever. And that's like where they'd be doing that. So this is currently connected to a SharePoint library and generates a folder for the member and the case every time a new one is created. And that's done automatically as the case is created through jobs. The files are saved in SharePoint rather than Salesforce, and then that's balance out storage. But we're not completely happy with this. We're not sure if we're going to go this way. It's more of an experimentation, but that's the kind of thing we're looking at, because we want caseworkers to be able to reorder documents, tag them in a particular way to say this needs to go, this is a key element to the case or anything like that. So something we're still working on, and will likely be something that we continue to build and improve as we go live as well, I think. And then finally here on the left-hand side of the, on the right-hand side of the main screen, you've got the key legal dates and the other deadlines, just at a glance here, which, as I said, some of them appear in the middle panel already, and we're looking at moving them over to the right. And we think this will be the way we probably go. So that middle panel will condense even more to allow for a much more streamlined view. You've got a button here which says mark ACAS confirmation received. So that's essentially a button which changes depending on the stage that the case is at. If it's a relatively new case, it will say set reminders. Click on that, and then essentially it triggers reminders. So if you're 28 days from the ACAS date, it will send an email to the member saying, make sure you put your ACAS early conciliation in. You'll do that after 21 days, after 14 days, after 7 days. how many times we want it to, as long as we automate it in, to make sure that's done until the status is changed. And then once the status is changed, it will go from, it will say that the ACAS confirmation has been received, and then that will change to the ET date. So then it would run off of the ET date you've got there. So it all runs off these dates that you can see. So what we're looking at now, and I'll try and make this a bit quick because I realize I've gone on for a very long time. This is essentially what the staff will see when they're inputting a new case. So instead of just having we're building a form through Salesforce Flow to allow them to do this. And this is just a form that they can fill in a very easy way to create the case. So you can separate it out into screens to make it a lot more user-friendly. You can see here that once I've selected the member, it will then pull through the key data for that member. So name, the member ID, whether their membership is actually active or not, you need to know that, the join date, the branch, current employer, and all that. It also brings through the contact email and the contact phone and allows them to update that if that is in fact different than we've got in the member record. And it will also bring through the employer into the case employer, which they can then X out of if it is a different employer that they are bringing the case against. And then obviously the date they join the employer, which we don't hold on our member database anyway. And then lastly here, just this is where we've got to with it, is the subject, which is auto-generated here. So that needs a bit of work. So bring in like the member name, the employer probably as well, just so that's there. And then the summary of the case goes in the case description. And that might just be the email that's been sent initially or anything like that. And then finally, just a quick glance at what knowledge looks like for members in PCS Digital. So they have, as you can see, the health and safety tag at the top, the question, you've got the search bar at the very top there saying search for PCS knowledge for help here, and it allows them to type in a question, and if they can find an answer, it turns up there. If they click on any of these, the coronavirus advice or the health and safety tabs at the bottom, it will take them through to that topic, so they can then search or scroll through more answers or more articles that they've got there. So yeah, that's where we are with all that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. And Paul, that was phenomenally useful and insightful. Thank you. Next, to bring in Chris Rimmel from Accord. Chris, over to you with a different approach to some of the same issues.
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing from Paul, kind of your experience, because that's what a CRM system should look like and should do for unions. We're in a slightly different position where our system, which I suppose the project probably started about 5 years ago, if I'm remembering rightly, and we're still not in that kind of advanced place where everything is integrated. So actually we're moving away from that one-stop shop fits for purpose for everything to using different systems to do different things. But it does mean that we are slightly fragmented in terms of where our data is. And this is an example of that. So we started, just to explain, we've got our CRM system that's there, and that's been in the background for some time. But we started over the last couple of years in terms of looking over to move on to the 365 platform. And what we didn't want to do is just lift and shift absolutely everything that we do and replicate it in the cloud, basically. We didn't want to do the same things. We wanted to look at how we could better integrate, how we could better utilize those tools. So I'm doing a really short talk on the one single aspect of that, which is settlement agreements. So in terms of our current process, what we had previously to move into this, we had no single place that a settlement agreement was managed from start to finish in its life cycle. And it was all driven by manual interventions. So it's emails coming in and going out, filling in spreadsheets, and Word documents. And actually we decided that probably wasn't the right thing that we were doing to just simply replicate that in the cloud. It also has a very heavy reliance on an officer remembering and diarising things and deciding when to take those critical steps, which I suppose from Paul's presentation you can see is being built into that system, which is absolutely what it should be. And we also had some duplication of effort. We want a settlement agreement to be dealt with for the member, but we also want some reporting capabilities in terms of how much did we get for that member, how much have we got overall for all our members, in the last year. So what we found was actually happening when I took a look at it is that an officer would do their bit, they would produce their Word document, and then those details afterwards were being translated into an Excel spreadsheet just to track the figures in terms of how much we were getting from members. So there was a lot of crossover and a lot of kind of time being spent on things that we didn't really need to be doing. And it was also really difficult to visualize how many cases you've got on the go, because if you're just dealing with it on emails, if you're like me, as soon as you've dealt with an email, you move it, delete it, you do whatever you can with it to get it out of your mailbox. So actually no one has an idea of how many cases we're dealing with or how many we've dealt with in a year, for example. So we reviewed that life cycle, understanding all the different touch points where each team needed to interact, what they needed to do with that, where approvals were needed, where solicitors were going to be appointed, understanding membership status and how we actually record the end-to-end case, because at the moment, well, previously it wasn't necessarily being recorded against a membership record. And obviously looking at those manual interventions and actually how can we improve it, how can we automate some of that and take some of the legwork out for both the officer but the admin team and management team, and also ensuring the solicitor gets the details that they need in order to process the case in the first place. And of course, in all of that, there's considerations about the data security, because we're moving away from a single system. Well, we never got to that single system, but you're moving away from that approach of having a single system where you deal with your case from end to end, to having basically data, members' data on the cloud. So there's important implications about who can see that, and obviously the data security and the permissions around how you release that information to individuals. So looking at all that, we went with it is actually quite from a technical point of view, it's quite a simple approach of having a SharePoint list that captured all the information, but then using some automations that are in 365, it's creating a work for that case. And it's able to drive some reminders to diarise interactions and to record what happens with those. So a real simple point around, for example, is what happens at the end of a settlement agreement. So we've agreed and negotiated a settlement for a member. Do they want to remain a member at the end of that? Very often what was happening is that the member simply wouldn't be asked the question because it would drop off the officer's pad and mind once it's with the solicitor, and therefore the members would come back to us sometime later and say, I left, why am I still paying? And it was because simply no one was asking them, do you still want to remain a member? Do we want to change you to an associate member, which has a different fee attached to it? And so ensuring that kind of step takes place. So that's the approach that we took. I've got a couple of, you can see some of the interactions that happen. So I don't want to do that. Go back. In terms of the process and the stage process, I'm going to walk you through that, but these are some of the things that get produced, so that there is still an email involvement in it, and that's because the case has to go to the solicitor and it has to go through email, but we also have encryption on that, so it enables us to send all the documentation encrypted as well. And this is an example of it's actually using a bot, but it's the pop-up that an officer will receive in Teams to say, have you done this? So this is just an example of that. But what I'm going to try and do, if I can technically do it, is jump to my other screen, new share, and I'm sharing this. There's a bit of a demo. We've got the settlement list here. You've got different statuses and different categories. I've created a demo list so that it's got no live data in, but I have created a test one, and it's basically using the out-of-box features of Microsoft Lists with a little bit of customization into how it's presented into columns rather than as a simple list, and it just gathers all the information that's needed, quite a bit of information. Where I would like this to be better integrated is that it pulls information from our membership database, but at this present moment it doesn't do that. So an officer has to manually enter all that information, and they work through that form. It then produces, so it then runs through Power Automate through a flow, which if you've never seen a flow before in your life, It's simple in that it's something that people can pick up and learn. You don't need to be a programmer to do it, but you need to understand logic and the way that those systems function. But it allows you to just slot different functions in there. We've got some error capability in there as well, so it pings emails to us if there's an error and it doesn't process something, and it picks up the item as soon as it's created from the SharePoint list, and then it runs through a series of steps to produce an email, to produce the workflow, and it even gathers the user profile of the individual who's created that record, so they don't even need to enter their own phone number, for example. It produces all of that and sends the email through the shared mailbox. And what that looks like in terms of the email that's produced, fairly simple HTML email. It just translates all that information into a usable format for the solicitor. As I said, it's sent through encrypted. This obviously isn't, but it would have an encrypted attachment on it, which is the flag for the system to encrypt it. And it's also got some information to validate that this is a genuine email. And for us, so for our manager to be able to view that item, to then approve it and move it on to the next status. So when an officer creates this record, it's a new referral, it goes to management to approve and to allocate a solicitor. They change the status to solicitor appointed, and then it gets sent to the solicitor. The officer who creates the record gets notified the whole way through as well to let them know that that's what's happening. And then the kind of final steps of it, once that workflow is in progress and that settlement's been agreed, one of the items of information that you ask for is actually, do they want to retain their membership? So we ask that up front, and also when is the contract date, so when are they ending their employment? And that then drives some additional workflow, so an officer has to enter an end date for someone's contract before this will work, and it drives that prompt that I showed you where it pops up a record on through Teams to say you need to go do something with this, and they can directly respond to that through the Teams prompt as well. And that then drives an additional step of workflow, which sends a task through, which is linked to Microsoft Planner. It sends a task through to our membership team to change the status of that individual's membership record as well. And at that point, they will also end the record onto the record on the CRM system. So they manually have to, unfortunately, enable that. There isn't a link to the CRM, which again is something I would love it to do, but given where we are with the membership system, asking them to do things like that, yeah, we're not that enamored with. Something that's slightly different to obviously what I've just talked about, I just wanted to also show that we're using similar kind of workflow for information sharing. We have reports and guidance, basically to store a document store for all our officers and all our Accord staff. And again, it's built on Microsoft lists with audiences which target who gets a prompt about this. And it lets them know when new information is uploaded. We get these weekly fax services from the LRD, most unions probably do. And also you can see that we've uploaded the digital one from the TUC that came out this week as well on managing IT infrastructure. And it just drives prompts. So it's a good way of us storing information, because previously it just went into a folder either on someone's personal drive or on our overall shared drive. And then that knowledge gets lost because it gets lost in the mire of other documents and stuff like that. And one final thing, if you don't mind, just because it's come up through the discussion with Paul, I think it's a really interesting thing that you build in the knowledge base into the membership database. I think that's an excellent idea. Again, we can't do that because of the restrictions of the system that we're on, but we have launched our own knowledge base through the website, which and it's also linked to our instant chat service. It allows members to go find information about the union, about joining us, about the benefits, and then also policies and procedures. So we've written, well, I've written a whole load of knowledge guidance about various aspects of employment, from things like holidays to raising grievances, and to try and do that self-service function that you're already trying to integrate into that database and stuff. It's really great stuff, actually, and I will finish on that.
Fantastic, Chris. That's also really, really insightful and interesting stuff. I really appreciate you sharing some of that. Thank you. Time is marching onwards. Bring in our colleague Andrea now, because one thing that's come up in both of those examples is the kind of sensitivity that you're needing to design in from the start for how you respect the members' data and keep yourself safe as well from things that you wouldn't have anticipated coming up. Andrea's been thinking a bit about some of the things unions are going to have to consider in this space. Over to you, Andrea.
Hi, everybody. Hope you can hear me. So I'm Andrea Peace. I'm a librarian by background. I've been working in the trade union movement for about 20 years in an information management role. And in the last 10 years, probably in data protection, I'm responsible for the internal GDPR compliance for the TUC. And so my presentations, it's just looking at some of the principles and things that you might need to think about from a GDPR perspective to ensure what you're doing is lawful. So just thinking about your responsibilities and some design issues, just wanted to just go back to principles and say, obviously you are the data controller under the GDPR, which is a proper role where you are responsible for the integrity and security of your member data. This means you need to put the technical and organisational things in to the organisation to make sure everything is safe as your members would expect, and you are responsible for your staff's actions and for your reps' actions, and if things go wrong, that comes back on you as data controller. So my sort of main headline message from me would be to have a well-designed, well thought through, well tested, consulted on approach to case management, whatever that looks like, and have it documented so that it shows if something goes wrong, and the regulator for the GDPR in the UK, that's the Information Commissioner's Office, gets involved in, sorry, just got to keep the lights going in the office, I'm the only one in here, gets involved in some kind of investigation, that you can show that you've done your due diligence from up front. And leading on from that, hopefully some of you will know of the principle of privacy by design, which is a sort of high level principle in the GDPR, which says that you need to think about the individual, your members, right from the outset of a project, and design that project or that system or that approach around those people to protect those individuals and their personal or sensitive personal data. And you do that through the use of a tool called a Data Protection Impact Assessment, a DPIA. This helps you think through the issue that you're trying to solve, legitimizes under the GDPR what data you're collecting and why you can collect it, and ticking the box in the GDPR that says that you can do that, looks at who you're sharing the data with, looks at retention, looks at security, and helps you to focus on what the risks are with your approach that you've put together, and then helps you think about mitigating those risks and putting those mitigations in place and writing all that up, as well as doing the mitigations, which is very important, and designing and releasing a great approach. It's also very important to have that DPIA in writing in case there is a situation that does go wrong, and that you can bring out as defence with the regulator and say, we have thought this through, it's gone wrong here, we admit that, but it's human error or whatever. So I would really preach the whole positivity of using a DPIA right at the beginning of setting up something like this. Random other things here, I think we've already probably covered this. Thinking about your data fields, it's not just about doing case management on a one-to-one basis, it's what data does your union actually want to know about cases, how much is it costing, is it that lots more women are in cases, or younger workers, or somebody from a certain ethnicity or disability? What fields are you going to build into your system to get your staff or reps that are running cases to help you get that management data out of the system? So good data in, good data out, think about what those fields would be. I've mentioned here role-based access control and permissions. The GDPR states that only the people that really need to see data should see data, which is complicated in a union structure. So what roles do you need to assign to see the really detailed case? X said Y about Z, and here's some evidence and that kind of thing. In my old union, we had a big debate when we were bringing in case management and CRM. We were debating our frontline staff in our call centre. Do they need to see that there's a case in play? Yes, probably, because they want to be able to recognise the person maybe vulnerable, maybe upset when they're calling in. Do they need to see all the detail of the case? Absolutely not, because they're not involved in actually running that case. And that was a decision we made for our business at that time, but you may have a different view, but you need to think about that in the design and build. When you're procuring your system, if you're going out and buying some kind of bolt-on module in the cloud or a purpose-built case management system, you're probably contracting with another organisation that are acting as your data processor under the GDPR, and as part of that you need a contract. You need to make sure that the data processing agreement clauses that are in the GDPR are in that contract, and actually that you're clear that the organisation is doing that. So that's about security, the training they give to their staff, and you feeling it's safe to allow them to work with you and your member data. And finally, I've got here some training for people using your case management system. Obviously, that's important in terms of giving a good service and doing the best you can for case management. But it's particularly also important, sorry, I'm thinking of covering your back here, around if things go wrong with the regulator coming in and looking at you, having the evidence. We trained these people on this date, we did refresher training on this date, is really helpful in terms of saying this is just human error, but we tried our best to enable our staff and our reps to work in the best possible way they could. So just a few things from me about, I'm looking at this in a very simple way, that there is a definite date from commencing a case, which I know sometimes not that straightforward, but if you're taking on a case, I would say from my perspective, good practice thing to do is to issue the privacy notice again to the member. So this is the document under the GDPR that articulates to them how you as an organisation, a trade union, are looking after their information, who gets access to it, how long is the data retained, what's their rights to challenge it. And it may be that you have a high level union privacy notice, but you may feel that you need to write a more closely knit case management privacy notice. So it just helps set expectations about what's going to happen with their data and hopefully heads off any kind of rows and that kind of thing down the line. I'd thought about system and protocol changes since the last time a staff member or rep actually did some supporting case management, but you've already covered that off in terms of having some kind of knowledge base that sort of is pushed or is available to search and supports those people doing those roles. Thought here about consent, which is an important part of the GDPR principles. One of the conditions of processing. If you're disclosing particularly sensitive personal data to third parties, you probably need to get and capture consent. And those third parties could be the employer, an occupational health, or some other person involved in the case. GDPR is very strict about consent and ensuring that you can evidence when that consent happens. So how do you capture consent in your case management system? So that's something for you to think about. I think data entry standards are very important. There's the low level sort of things like the training on don't put gossip in there, that it's factual and professional entries. But I think there's some other things like in the health environment, it's very easy for one of your members being accused by a patient of something who's got access to that patient record to access and take something out of that patient record to help present to you to help with their case, but that could be a breach of GDPR without permission to do that. So getting legal advice about those kind of issues and building that into your protocols and ensuring that you don't cause more issues for that member by them working naively and you supporting them and you putting it into your system. And finally, just thinking about security, how do you share data if you are sharing data around in a secure way? Do you have standards around using encrypted memory sticks or emails with passwords, or a sort of Dropbox that is in your cloud that's got a link that expires after so many days? And we can't get away from the fact that in normal times people travel to cases and are taking kit and equipment out. Is that encrypted? If they're taking paper, is it in a locked bag? Are they ensuring they're not overheard on a train if they're talking about the case? So there's real simple principles, sorry, but I just thought it was worth reinforcing those in terms of you thinking about your protocols. End of case. There is an end of case, hopefully. I think it's important to reaffirm the retention period. Is it 7 years from the close of the case? Just so that if you're then pushing the delete button at some point and that person then trots up 10 years later and expects you to have everything about it, you've got some defense that we told you at the time of the end of the case that this is how long we're going to keep it. And you've heard already from colleagues about building really whizzy ways of using workflows and things like that, but big, busy unions with lots of cases, I would argue that using some kind of software that helps you either flag, you need to review this case for deletion, or automatic deletion would be a handy thing to look at. And another thought is, I'm real one for deletions, data protection officers usually are, but stop and think, is this a really amazing case? Can I anonymise that truly and use that in some way for case study or some ongoing training and support before you toss it away? John, please, thank you. So just stepping back and remembering under GDPR that you have a responsibility to evidence your compliance and keep on top of that. So this could apply to anything really, not just case management. Just to remind you, having a good data protection policy that's up to date, that has all your case management protocols and standards, and making sure your staff have looked at that and also reps are working on case management is important. Ensuring once you've landed what that case management approach is, that it gets on your corporate information asset register. Under the GDPR, you have to map out what personal data you're collecting, for what purpose, in what systems, who's your data processors, how long the data is going to be retained, and having this high level map. So if there is a problem, a breach or some other issue, and the ICO or your data protection, or your auditors want to see all this, it's all very easy to pull out and show. And so your case management should be on there too. Thinking of handover protocols, if staff leave, if reps leave, and particularly if you've got a process where you're still using emails and you're still having things in OneDrives or personal drives, how you ensure you get that data about cases out before people disappear and you get it into somebody else's system, so you've retained that sort of source of truth. Thinking about breach management, if you keep having breaches around casework, what are the patterns? Standing back and looking at that, and what are the fixes that you can put in place? And I would argue that the A word, audit, is actually important and useful to you in terms of general GDPR compliance, but definitely around case management, around things like taking some samples of files, looking at whether how those cases have been run and are they living up to your policies and standards, and particularly checking how easy it is to get everything to do with that case very quickly, because for a GDPR rights request, like a subject access or a right to be forgotten request, you only have 30 days to do all the kind of getting all the data together and then looking at your response and working through that. So does your case management system stand up to that? Can you get that data out quickly? So sorry if that feels like a real whistle stop and it's the preachy DPO talk to end this, but I'm going to end with saying, data protection officers are your friendly, helpful person on staff. We are here to support you, and please do talk to us at the beginning of a project. If you're changing system or if you're having breaches and problems, our job is not to say no, our job is to help find a solution and help work around things as long as it's legal. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andy. That's fantastic. Thank you. I'm really clear and help us as we're used to working with you on so many TUC things. Thanks very much to Paul, Chris, and Andrea for sharing some really useful stuff. And I'm really interested to hear from everybody else going forward how you're seeing this stuff changing in your unions. We'll be trying to put out a note about this, but please do keep any information coming back in, and anything else that you want convened around this stuff, do give us a shout. Thanks again to our panel, and we'll see you all shortly. Thank you.